Please, buy me. Say I am yours. Breathing.
I don't keep such things.
Keep the memory.
Dust Creek, Arizona Territory, 1,874 high noon. The desert held its breath like a clenched fist. Air trembled over the flats, light so bright it carved the bones out of thought. Nothing moved except the buzzards tracing slow circles over Ghost Pass. Even the flies gave up their songs. Then she ran. Barefoot skirts ripped to the knee, wrists cut raw from rawhide. Nizoni came off the ridge like someone who'd left her soul behind. The ground bit her feet with cactus thorns and obsidian chips. Behind her 5 riders rose through dust. 3 slavers, 2 soldiers, their whoops thin in the heat. A shot went wide, spitting stone and the smell of iron. "Don't waste bullets," one barked. "She's worth more breathing." She didn't look back. Looking back gave shape to what hunted you. She kept her head turned sideways, listening to the desert. Instead, the crack of heat, the scrape of her breath, the whisper of something that might have been water. Down on the flat, a single horse waited in the shade of a dying cottonwood. A man stood beside it, sleeves rolled, hat low, pouring a trickle from a canteen into a tin cup. His hands were steady in a world that punished steadiness. Thomas Mercer. He saw her coming before she fell, just a blur of dark hair and sunburned skin. He didn't move at first, didn't draw. The old habit of a lawman was to wait, see where trouble meant to land. When she hit the ground 20 paces out, it wasn't collapse. It was surrender calculated. She dropped to her knees in the hot grit, palms open. Breath tore through her chest. "Please," she said. English short, the way her father taught when extra words drew pain. "By me. Say I am yours." The air quivered. Mercer blinked once, jaw tight. Up the slope the riders burst onto the flat, a thin parade of dust and noise. Their leader, Harlan Vibert, smiled like a man who liked the taste of his own cruelty. "There's our property," he called. "Got papers if you read." Mercer didn't answer. His eyes dropped to the rawhide cuts at Nizoni's wrists, to the iron tag on her neck stamped with a number. He'd seen numbers like that before, on lists, on orders, on graves. Vibert spat. $40 from the army, twice that from gentlemen. Runner's fee now. Step aside. The young soldier grinned. "She'll bring more after we break her in." The heat hummed. Nizoni bowed her head to keep the sun from drilling through her skull. Mercer took a breath, slow and long, as if prayer still worked for men who'd failed at mercy. He moved 1 step so the cottonwood shadow fell across her shoulders. A small thing, but it changed the math of the moment, put him between her and them. "The army sells coffee," he said, voice low. "Not people." Vibert's grin cracked. "You knew here, paper's paper. Now move." Mercer bent, poured the last of the water into the tin cup and offered it to her. She drank carefully, like it belonged to the land, not him. "You got a name?" he asked. She hesitated. In her tongue, names were doors dangerous to open. But the man had given shade. Shade meant something. "Nizoni," she said, "means beautiful. I am not that now." Mercer's mouth twitched. "Names are patient." A rifle cracked behind them, stones singing apart. Mercer didn't flinch. He set the cup down beside her, straightened and pulled his coin purse. 4 silver tens. He tossed them into the dust. 40, he said. "Same as your law." Vibert laughed. "You think this is a church?" "No," Mercer said. "Just buying silence." The young soldier shifted his rifle. Mercer didn't reach for his gun. He let the idea of it hang in the air. "Ride on," he said. "You've made enough noise for one day." Vibert's smile flattened. His eyes did the counting guns, distance odds. Then he spat again. 40 buys a night, not forever. 40 buys her life, Mercer said. Forever's her choice. Something in the words cooled the day. Vibert bent, scratched 1 coin through the dirt. He wanted to make a scene, but something in Mercer's stillness said that would end with a grave. "You'll regret it," Vibert said. "Paper's got her name." Mercer tipped his hat, then burned the paper. The men backed off slow. Vibert looked over his shoulder, once muttered something to the soldier. "Red Willow Canyon." Mercer heard it, filed it. The desert always listened when men said names like that. When they were gone, the wind returned, dragging the silence back over everything. Mercer crouched, picked up the coins, wiped them clean, slid them away. "Can you ride?" he asked. Nizoni glanced at the horse. "I can hold on. That's all it takes." He tore a strip of cloth from his saddle roll and handed it to her. "For your wrists, not your hands." She wrapped them tight, hiding the marks, but not the story. When she looked up, he'd already mounted. He reached down. She hesitated, then took his arm. Her grip was strong. She pulled herself up behind the saddle, silent. "Hold the horn," he said. "If you fall, I don't fall." He nodded once, touched his heels, and the horse lunged forward. They cut across the flats where heat shimmered like ghosts, trying to wake. After a mile, her breath steadied. "Why you stop?" she asked. "Habit," he said. "A man who won't stop forgets he's human. Many men forget." "Are you calling me one of them? I call you the one with water," she said. And that was thanks enough. By the time they reached the canyon, the light had turned bronze. Red Willow stood tall and narrow, its walls streaked with shadow. Mercer's cabin sat near the mouth, half swallowed by rock and stubbornness. A fence framed the yard. Smoke rose thin from an old chimney. He dismounted, handed her his canteen. "Inside, there's coffee." She didn't move. "Say it again," she said. He frowned. "Say what?" "That I'm yours." For them to hear it was lie. For me, I need it true until I say stop. He studied her a long moment. "You're mine," he said quietly, then added, "until you're not." Her mouth tilted. "I will say when." Inside the cabin smelled of coffee wood and solitude. She looked around, rifle on the pegs, Bible unopened, the clean and dirty lines of a man who lived half in regret. Mercer poured coffee, set a tin cup in front of her. "Soap's there," he said, nodding at the basin. "It stings, then forgives." She washed, hissed, once, then pulled the iron tag from her neck. The metal left a pale circle on her skin. She laid it on the table like a dead snake. "Keep that," she said. "I don't keep such things. Keep the memory." They ate beans in silence. Outside, twilight leaned against the canyon like an exhausted thing. The wind rose, whispering through sage and the boards of the porch. Mercer stepped out, scanned the horizon. A low dust thread hung where Ghost Pass met the sky. Vibert hadn't gone far. "They'll come," Nizoni said behind him. "They will," Mercer said. He took the rifle from the wall, checked it once, set it on the table, ready but not pointed. "You're safe," he told her. She didn't thank him. She walked past him onto the porch, knelt, and pressed her palm to the boards. She whispered in Apache, soft enough that only the wood heard. "What'd you tell it?" he asked. "To remember me," she said, "as more than a price." Mercer's face softened, lines shifting like dust after wind. From far off, a rider whooped a punctuation mark on unfinished business. The echo rolled through the cliffs and back. He looked at the sky, at the thin silver of a hawk circling high. The sun was going down, but not enough to cool the world yet. He put his hat back on and rolled his sleeves. Inside, he said, this time she went before he did. He followed, setting the rifle where his hand could find it if the night grew teeth. He blew out the lamp. The room sank into dark, threaded with the smell of coffee and rain that hadn't yet fallen. Outside, the desert rearranged itself into night, slow, patient, unforgiving. Paper would come. Men would come. But for now, in that small cabin at the edge of the red world, the math was simple. One woman still breathing, one man who stopped when others didn't, and a price already paid in silver and shade. The trail to Red Willow Canyon rose like a question that never quite got answered. Mercer's horse carried 2 hearts and 1 silence, both heavier than the saddlebag. Behind him, Nizoni rode, stiff hands clenched at his coat, her breath small, and even as if the air might shatter if she asked for too much of it. They rode until the sun turned copper, and the horizon began to bleed. Only then did Mercer rein in at the rim of the canyon. The land below spread out in folds of rust and violet shadow. A narrow stream crawled through the center like a thread someone had dropped and forgotten to pick up. He pointed with his chin. "Down there," he said. She didn't answer, but her eyes followed the path. The descent was slow. The horse's hooves slid on shale dust, puffing in lazy ghosts. When they reached the bottom, the air changed, cooler, alive with sage and damp earth. Mercer's cabin waited near the bend, built half into the rock, its roof patched with tin and stubbornness. The place smelled of pine smoke and rain that had forgotten to fall. Nizoni slid off the horse before he could help. She steadied herself against a post, her wrists still bandaged with his cloth. "You can stay inside," he said. "I'll sleep near the door. Suit yourself." He unhitched, the horse poured water into the trough, and felt her eyes on him, watchful, measuring the distance between gratitude and fear. Inside the cabin held the shape of one man's solitude, one chair, one cup, one bedroll. A rifle leaned against the wall. Dust hung like quiet between beams of light. Mercer struck a match, lit the oil lamp, and filled a pot with water. The kettle hissed. The sound made Nizoni flinch. He pretended not to notice. "You hungry?" She nodded once. "Beans. Bread's old." "Old food feeds," she said softly. He handed her a tin plate. She ate, slow chewing, as if her body didn't quite trust mercy. Mercer sat opposite, elbows on knees, staring at the flames dance inside the kettle. The small sounds of eating filled the space like new weather. After a while she asked, "Why you help me?" Mercer shrugged. "Wasn't planning to." Then why he poked the coals with a stick, watched sparks lift, like insects seeking purpose. "Maybe I remembered something I wanted to forget." Nizoni's gaze dropped to the rope scars on her wrists. Men remember what they own, not what they break. Her words were calm, not cruel, the kind of truth that didn't need volume. Mercer looked at her then properly. "You talk like you've already forgiven the world." She met his eyes. "Forgiving is just living without choking on the past." He didn't answer. There were too many pasts to choke on. That night, after the dishes were stacked and the lamp turned low, Mercer spread a blanket near the hearth. "You take the bed," he said. She shook her head. "I sleep by the fire. The floor doesn't judge." He almost smiled. "Neither do I. That's what men say before they remember how." Her tone left no room for argument. Mercer lay down on his cot, staring at the roof beams, listening. The wind slipped through the cracks, carrying scents of juniper and old smoke. Somewhere, a coyote called long and hollow. Then, beneath it, another sound, soft, rhythmic, almost human. Nizoni was humming. The melody rose and fell like breath. The tune had no words, he knew, but it filled the cabin until the air itself seemed to ease its shoulders. Mercer turned toward the fire. Her face flickered and the light eyes half closed. The marks on her wrists caught the glow rings of shadow and gold. She wasn't praying, she was remembering. He listened until sleep came, and for the first time in years, the dark didn't bite. Morning was a pale wash of light over the canyon walls. Mercer woke to the sound of movement, quiet, efficient. Nizoni was outside, sweeping dust off the porch with a bundle of dry grass. The cloth around her wrists had loosened, stained with rust-colored blood. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know." Her voice was even. She finished sweeping, then bent to gather a handful of ashes from the fire pit, scattered them across the dirt. "What's that for?" "For peace," she said. "Ash feeds the next fire." Mercer watched her, a flicker of something in his chest. He didn't recognize pride, maybe, or the ache of respect. When the sun climbed higher, he saddled the horse. "I need to check the ridge. Make sure no one follow." She wiped her hands on her skirt. "They will follow, I know, but they'll have to find the way first. I can hide the trail," she offered, "if you trust me." Mercer hesitated. Then he nodded. "Show me." They spent the morning walking back along their own tracks. Nizoni bent low, brushing sage branches over the prints, rearranging loose stones, breaking cactus stems to confuse direction. Her movements were patient, precise. She didn't speak until they reached the ridge. "You hunted before?" she asked. "Tracked men," he said. She studied him a moment. Different kind of prey. Sometimes not so different. When they turned back, Mercer noticed her hands trembling slightly. He offered his canteen. She drank, then handed it back, their fingers brushing. For a heartbeat, the contact felt like something fragile learning to live. They reached the cabin near noon. He fed the horse. She gathered sage and hung it to dry. The rhythm of work made silence easy. By evening, the air smelled of smoke and green resin. At supper, Nizoni sat near the door legs, tucked beneath her. "You lived here long?" she asked. 5 years. "Alone?" he nodded. "Some men are built for quiet." She tilted her head. No one is built for ghosts. The words landed deep. Mercer's jaw tightened. You think you know ghosts I buried enough? He almost told her then about the raid on the San Carlos camp, the fire, the screams that never left his ears but stopped. Confession was a luxury earned, not owed. Instead he said, "Get some sleep. I'll keep watch." She didn't argue, just laid down near the hearth again, turning her back to the light. The cabin breathed with a crackle of pine sap. Mercer sat on the porch, rifle across his knees. The moon dragged silver across the canyon. Somewhere far off a horse whinnied, one note cut short. He listened hard, but the night swallowed the sound. He turned his eyes to the valley below, to the thin river that reflected starlight like a wound trying to heal. For the first time he wasn't sure if he was guarding her or she was guarding something in him. By dawn the air smelled of rain, though no cloud showed. Nizoni stirred the fire back to life, moving with quiet assurance. Mercer poured coffee, the rich bitterness grounding him. "You sleep a little." He handed her a tin cup. "You could leave. Take the horse." She looked out the window. "And go where the world outside has longer chains." Mercer didn't reply. He stared into the steam. A sudden gust rattled the shutters. Both turned toward the sound. On the far ridge, 3 dark specks moved against the light riders, too far to see faces, close enough to see dust. Mercer's hand went to the rifle before thought caught up. Nizoni's eyes narrowed. "They found us," she whispered. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe the world just likes to remind us it's watching." He stood, checked the chamber, then met her gaze. "If they come, you stay behind the wall. Don't run." She reached for the knife on the table, slid it into her belt. "I don't run," she said. The moment held quiet, certain. Then the wind shifted, carrying faint echoes of men's voices, and a laugh Mercer recognized from the auction yard. Crow. He exhaled through his teeth. "So it begins." Nizoni tilted her head. "You afraid only of bad aim." She almost smiled, the first real curve of light on her lips since Ghost Pass. "Then shoot true," she said. Mercer nodded once. He could already feel the ache of what was coming, the line he'd have to cross again, the blood he'd sworn to stop spilling. But some debts, he realized, don't ask for payment. They ask for witnesses. He stepped outside, the rifle warm against his palm. The canyon wind carried dust down from the ridge, and in it, the faint taste of copper. Behind him, Nizoni's voice rose in a low hum, the same melody from the night before. The song wove through the air, thin as smoke, steady as a heartbeat. Mercer closed his eyes for half a breath, let the sound settle under his ribs, and smiled without meaning to. Then he chambered around, looked up at the ridge, and whispered, "Let them come." Red Willow Canyon, 2 days later. The rain never came, but the sky kept the promise of it. Low, gray, heavy with waiting. In that strange hush before weather, Red Willow Canyon seemed to breathe slower, like the earth itself was listening. Thomas Mercer had lived alone so long that silence used to be company. Now it was something shared, and that made it harder to carry. Nizoni moved through his small world without asking, without explaining. She swept dust from corners, stacked wood in even piles, folded his one spare shirt so neatly that he found it almost embarrassing to wear again. She did it all without a sound. He fixed the fence that had leaned since last winter, the hammer echoing sharp against the rock walls. Once when he dropped a nail, she was already there, barefoot, quick, holding it out. Their hands touched for half a second. She didn't pull back, and neither did he. By afternoon, the sky bruised purple. Mercer led the horse to water while Nizoni rinsed tin plates in the river. She crouched, low sleeves, rolled wrists, scarred but steady. The water shimmered against her skin like light that didn't know how to leave. "You work too much," he said from behind her. "You watch too much," she replied without turning. "Old habit. So is breathing," she said, and the ghost of a smile lived in her voice. He stepped beside her, squatted down. The river whispered through stones, carrying its own slow truth. "When I was your age," he said, "I thought work could fix anything. Did it? No. But it kept me from breaking faster." She looked at him, her gaze steady, dark as polished obsidian. "Maybe the earth fixes the men who work it," Mercer grunted. "You think I'm fixable? I think you're still trying," she said, and went back to scrubbing. That evening, clouds gathered but refused to break. The air smelled of wet dust and sage. Nizoni cooked with what they had: beans, onions, the last strip of salt pork. Mercer sat at the table sharpening his knife, the rhythm soft and slow. When she set the pot down, he said quietly, "You sing when you cook. It keeps the fire calm." I've never heard that kind of song before. It's not for hearing. It's for remembering what she met his eyes. That, I'm still here. They ate. Outside wind brushed the canyon walls with a hollow sigh. When the meal was done, she reached for his cup to wash it. But he stopped her hand gently. "You don't have to serve me." She paused. "And you don't have to save me." Yet we both did. The fire cracked and neither spoke again for a long while. The next morning, Mercer found her near the corral carving a small stick with his pocket knife. "What are you making?" She blew the wood dust off her fingers. "A whistle. For your horse. He won't come for sound. Maybe for spirit," she said. She raised the whistle to her lips, blew once soft, clear, almost human. The horse lifted its head from the trough, ears twitching. Mercer blinked. "I'll be damned." Maybe she said lightly, but not today. He laughed, really laughed. The sound startled them both, like a door swinging open in a long-abandoned room. She smiled, then brief but real. It struck him deeper than any bullet had ever done. They fell into a rhythm after that. Morning's chores, repairs, simple talk about weather or the stubborn mule. Afternoon's silence that didn't press, only rested. At dusk, she often sat outside, eyes fixed on the horizon where heat met sky. Sometimes she hummed. Sometimes she just listened. Mercer joined her once, sitting close enough to feel the warmth off her shoulder. "Do you ever miss them?" he asked quietly. "My people?" She nodded. "They are in the wind now. When it moves, I remember. And the ones who hurt them, the wind remembers them too," she said. But not kindly. He turned his gaze to the land stretching endless before them. "If I told you I was there at San Carlos when the fire came..." She didn't flinch. "You were one of them. I tried to stop it." "Did you know?" Nizoni's breath came slow. "Then you're still trying." "I don't deserve to. No one does. But the earth forgives what it keeps alive." The silence that followed wasn't cruel. It was the kind that grows things. By twilight, the sky split with a single streak of lightning far to the south. The air trembled with the promise of rain. Nizoni stood tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "They'll come," she said softly. "Who the men from before? The ones who lost their price." Mercer rose too. "I've handled worse." "I don't doubt that," she said. "But this time, don't stand alone." He nodded once, understanding the weight behind her words. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stood at the doorway, the rifle across his arms, watching the stars. The moon had gone, leaving only a pale ghost of light over the cliffs. Behind him, Nizoni slept near the fire, one hand curled near her face. The sight was almost peaceful. Mercer whispered into the dark, maybe to the land itself. "Keep her. She's better than this place deserves." A coyote answered somewhere deep in the canyon, and the wind rose, carrying the smell of rain. When he turned back inside, she stirred, eyes half open. "You talk to ghosts again," he froze. "You were awake." "Sometimes I listen better when I sleep." He smiled faintly. "Then tell them to stay quiet tonight." "I told them to guard us," she murmured. "They listen better than men." Her eyes closed again, and Mercer stood there longer than he meant, to watching the slow rhythm of her breath, the shadow of her hand rising and falling like a tide. Outside, thunder rolled across Red Willow, and for the first time he didn't feel alone inside the sound. When morning came, the storm still hadn't broken, but its smell was everywhere, wet, air heavy and electric. The canyon held its breath. Mercer knew before he saw them, hoofbeats, faint, deliberate, too many to be chance. He stepped onto the porch, scanning the ridge. Dust. 4 riders. He didn't need the spyglass to know Crow was leading them. Behind him, Nizoni appeared, hair unbound, face calm. "You were right," he said. "I usually am." He almost laughed again, but the sound died under the weight of the moment. "Go inside," he said. She didn't move. "I'll not hide." "You'll do as I've done enough dying in shadows," she interrupted quietly. Mercer looked at her. Really looked. The line of her shoulders, the unflinching eyes. She wasn't afraid. She was finished being prey. He nodded, once loaded the rifle, and took a slow breath. "Then we stand," he said. Together they watched the riders descend into the canyon. The dust trailed behind them like smoke from an old fire refusing to die. The first drops of rain began to fall. Red Willow Canyon, the day the rain finally came. The storm did not arrive all at once. It gathered in the corners of the sky like a secret building weight, whispering through the cottonwoods. By noon the clouds had lowered until the canyon felt half buried in dusk. The smell of iron and sage pressed against the air. Thomas Mercer stood on the porch with his rifle across his arms. He'd been watching the ridge since dawn. He knew what dust looked like when it came from wind and when it came from hooves. The dust that moved now was steady, deliberate, hungry. Inside, Nijoni was binding bundles of herbs, her fingers quick but calm. When the horsemen appeared, four shapes cut out of the pale horizon, she didn't look surprised. "They found us," Mercer said. "I told you the wind remembers," she answered. He turned toward her. "Then the wind has a mean memory." Nizoni set the herbs aside, wiped her hands on her skirt, and stepped to the doorway. Her eyes followed the riders winding down the slope, the lead man's red scarf bright as blood against the storm. Crow, the kind of man who carried his cruelty like a badge. Mercer loaded his rifle with a slow, deliberate rhythm. "Stay inside." She shook her head. "I will not hide again." He gave her a look that might have been anger, might have been fear. "When shooting starts, you move behind the hearth." "You hear?" Nizoni didn't answer. She picked up the small knife she used for cutting sage and slipped it into her belt. The first thunder rolled when Crow reached the yard. He reined his horse too close to the porch, the animal's breath steaming in the cooling air. Two soldiers flanked him, and behind them a thin, nervous man held the reins of a pack mule, the same trader who had sold at Ghost Pass. "Well," Marshal Crow drawled, "didn't think we'd meet again so soon. Thought you'd hung up that badge for good." Mercer stepped down off the porch, rifle loose at his side. "Still don't wear one. Don't need one to tell right from wrong." Crow spat into the mud. "Right and wrong. Don't play preacher, Mercer. That woman's property. You bought her same as we did. Only difference is you forgot to pay taxes on the deal." Mercer's jaw hardened. "She's free." Crow laughed, a short, hard sound swallowed by the wind. "Free ain't a word the territory recognizes." He flicked his reins, letting his horse sidestep closer. "Now hand her over, and maybe I'll let you keep breathing desert air." Nizoni stepped out before Mercer could stop her. The wind tugged her hair across her face. Her eyes were steady, black and bright. "You come with papers," she said quietly, "but no souls." Crow turned toward her, grinning. "Hear that, boys? She talks like she thinks she's still people," the trader muttered. "Just give her up, Mercer. No sense dying for what's already broken." Mercer lifted his rifle, then one motion smooth and certain. "Back your horses out of my yard." Crow's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You'd shoot a man for talking, I'd shoot a man for not listening." For a long, wet heartbeat, the world held still. The rain began not hard, but cold, thin needles cutting through heat and dust. One drop struck Mercer's cheek, ran down to the corner of his mouth, tasted like rust. Crow moved first. His pistol came up, a flash of metal against gray light. Mercer fired before thought caught up. The shot cracked the air in half. Crow's hat jumped from his head. The bullet grazed the brim and shaved a line across his temple. The horses reared, screaming. Then everything broke loose. The soldiers fired wild bullets, chewing the porch rail. Splinters sliced the rain. Nizoni ducked behind the doorway, loading Mercer's spare rifle with hands that didn't shake. When one of the soldiers swung down from his horse and rushed forward, she stepped out, fired, once the man spun backward into the mud, shock wide on his face before the rain covered it. Mercer took the far side, moving with the memory of a marshal's precision. He hit the second soldier's rifle, sent it spinning, then put a round through his shoulder. The man screamed, stumbled away. Crow still sat high in the saddle, blood streaking his temple, eyes full of hate that looked almost holy. He lifted his gun again. "Should have stayed," retired Mercer. Mercer barely turned when the bullet struck him. It hit just below the collarbone, driving him back against the post. The world dropped out from under him, the sound, the light, everything. He tasted dust and copper felt heat spill down his chest. He fired anyway. The shot went wide but close enough to make Crow's horse bolt sideways. The animal reared, throwing its rider into the wet clay. When Crow hit the ground, he didn't get up right away. Nizoni was already running toward Mercer. "Thomas!" Her voice broke against the thunder. She caught him as he sagged to his knees, her arm around his shoulders, blood seeping between her fingers. "You breathe. You hear me." He tried to answer, but the words drowned in the storm. The traitor turned his horse and fled, the last soldier limping after him, leaving Crow crawling in the mud. Nizoni dragged Mercer inside the door, slamming against the wind. She pulled him onto the floor near the hearth, ripped open his shirt, and pressed her hands to the wound. Blood welled hot too fast. "Stay with me," she whispered. "You did not buy me just to die." Mercer's lips moved. "Guess I overpaid." She almost laughed, then choked on it. She grabbed her pouch of herbs, crushed the leaves between her palms, mixed them with ashes from the cold fire. "Hold still," she said. He hissed when the mixture touched his skin. "That burn means you live," she said. Outside, thunder rolled again closer, now echoing through the canyon like drums of war. Rain hammered the roof. The world smelled of smoke and iron and forgiveness. Crow's shadow filled the doorway. His face was pale under streaks of blood and dirt. He raised his revolver with both hands shaking but still dangerous. "You should have let me have her," he rasped. Nizoni turned eyes hard as obsidian. "You already had too much." She grabbed Mercer's rifle from the table, swung it up, not aiming long, not needing to. The shot slammed Crow backward into the storm. He fell without a sound. For a moment there was only rain. When she returned to Mercer, he was half-conscious, eyes glassy but alive. The wound still bled, but slower now, the herbs doing their quiet work. She tore a strip from her skirt, bound his chest tight, and pressed her palm over his heart. "Do not leave me," she murmured in Apache. "The earth still owes us dawn." He blinked at her, unfocused. "What did you say? I told the land to remember you? You think it listens? It listens to what bleeds into it." He managed a weak smile. "Then I'm part of it now." She leaned close until her forehead touched his. "Yes," she whispered. "You belong to the ground that forgives." The fire guttered low, catching on the damp wood. She fed it handfuls of dry grass, coaxed it back to life. Its glow washed his face in amber light. Outside, the rain softened to a steady whisper, as if the canyon itself were singing. Nizoni began to hum low melodic, the same tune she had used to calm the fire, to heal the night. The words were old Apache, half prayer, half promise. Mercer's breathing eased, falling in rhythm with the song. He drifted toward sleep. The pain blurred, replaced by warmth, the smell of sage, the press of her hand, the quiet insistence of life refusing to stop. Somewhere deep in that haze, he heard her voice again. "You gave silver. I give breath. Now we are even." By midnight, the storm had passed. The air outside steamed cool and clean. Crow's body lay face down in the mud, washed until it looked almost human again. The canyon had taken back its silence. Inside, Mercer slept under Nizoni's watch. She sat beside him, eyes on the small flame that refused to die. Her hands were stained with his blood, but she didn't wipe them clean. Instead, she reached down, touched the earth through the cracks in the floor, and whispered a single word that meant balance. Then she leaned back against the wall, humming softly until the night forgot to be cruel. Red Willow Canyon, the day the world began again. Dawn came soft, like a hand brushing dust from a wound. Mist rose from the river silver, and slow curling through the cottonwoods where crows had gone silent. The air smelled of wet cedar ash and something cleaner, something almost like forgiveness. Inside the cabin, Thomas Mercer opened his eyes to light. For a moment he didn't know where he was. The ceiling above him was patched wood, the air still tasted of smoke and herbs. Then pain returned, a dull weight beneath his ribs, and memory followed rain gunfire. Nizoni's face bending over him, the sound of her voice carrying him back through the dark. He turned his head. She was there, crouched by the hearth, stirring a small pot. Her hair hung loose and damp down her back. The firelight caught the strands, turning them copper at the ends. She looked over when she felt his gaze. "You wake?" she said simply. "Couldn't stay asleep," he murmured, voice rough as gravel. "You should. I've been sleeping through my life for years," he said, trying to sit. Pain answered fast. Nizoni crossed the room, pressed a firm hand to his shoulder. "Lie still. The wound is deep, but not cruel. It only asks for time." He smiled faintly. "I never been good at giving time to anything." "Then learn now," she said. She ladled broth into a tin cup, held it to his lips. It tasted of sage and meat and rainwater, simple, steady things. He drank slowly, and when he finished, she wiped the edge of the cup with her sleeve, as if it mattered to keep the moment clean. Outside, the wind moved through the valley in long sighs. The canyon that had felt like a grave the night before now breathed again. Later, when the sun rose higher, Mercer managed to stand. His bandaged chest pulled with every breath, but the world no longer spun. He stepped to the doorway, leaned against the frame. The yard was quiet except for the drip of water from the eaves. The body of Crow was gone. Only a shallow mound near the river showed where Nizoni had buried him. "You shouldn't have done that alone," Mercer said when she joined him. "I wasn't alone," she answered. "The earth helped." He nodded. "It always does if you let it." For a long moment they stood side by side, watching the river thicken in the morning light. The sky had gone clean blue, the kind that makes even scars look like part of something whole. Nizoni walked a few steps toward the yard. There, near the porch, the ground had been turned over a small patch of black soil, soft from the rain. Mercer frowned. "What are you planting my father's seed?" she said, kneeling. "Corn that remembers water. I carried it since before the soldiers came." He stepped closer. "You think it'll grow here? If corn will grow, the land still forgives." She pressed each kernel into the soil, her hands gentle, sure. Mercer knelt beside her without thinking. The movement pulled at his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He scooped a handful of earth, dark and cool, and covered the seeds she'd planted. When they finished, she sat back on her heels. Dirt streaked her wrists. Her breath clouded faintly in the cool air. "You think the land can forgive me too?" he asked quietly. Nizoni brushed the soil from her fingers. "You bled into it. That's how the earth remembers who belongs." Mercer looked down at the ground, at the small patch that would one day be green. "Guess I belong then." "Yes," she said. "But belonging is not owning. Remember that." "I do," he said softly. "You taught me." The day stretched slow. Mercer fixed the broken latch on the barn. Nizoni fetched water from the river. Every movement was simple, deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if the act of living itself needed to be learned again. By afternoon, clouds gathered over the ridge, white and harmless. The world smelled of sun on wet earth. Nizoni sat on the porch, weaving a small braid from strands of horsehair. Mercer joined her, lowering himself onto the step beside her. "What's that?" he asked. "A reminder of what that mercy doesn't end, where pain begins." She finished the braid, tied it with a strip of cloth, and held it out. "My people give this to those who listen to the land," she said, "to remind them not to forget." Mercer took it, gently ran a thumb over the coarse weave. "You trust me with that?" Her eyes softened. "I trust what I see in you." He hesitated. "And what do you see?" "A man who stopped running when the world told him to hide." He said nothing, only slipped the braid around his wrist. The fibers scratched lightly against his skin, grounding him more than any prayer. As the sun began to fall, they sat together in the long light. The canyon glowed copper and gold. The little patch of soil shimmered faintly, as if the seeds beneath were already remembering the rain. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. Nizoni turned her face toward the horizon. "I did once, when there was nowhere left to go. And now I have a place that knows my name." He nodded, eyes still on the light. "You're free now, Nizoni. You can go anywhere." She looked at him for a long moment. "Then I choose to stay." Mercer swallowed hard. "Why? Because freedom isn't the road," she said. "It's the hands that build home." He reached out, rested his palm over hers. Their fingers met rough and steady. Neither spoke. The wind carried through the canyon, soft as breath, threading between them. When night came, the stars rose clear, reflected in the river, like scattered embers. Mercer sat on the porch steps, his rifle leaning idle against the wall, the pain in his shoulder fading to a dull memory.